Part 1. The Stage. The movie begins with a woman named Sloane running for her life. She reaches a mansion and screams for help. Hiding under a table, she picks up a ringing phone. The caller tells her to calm down before she is captured by her pursuers. Sloane struggles a bit, but is subdued quickly by masked men. Next, a plane is seen flying over the island. A running Julia informed Roarke that the plane had arrived. The plane lands and the guests come out. They are greeted by Roarke's staff with a garland. The 5 guests appear to have won some sort of contest to get to the island. The guests are Melanie, Brax, JD, Patrick, and Gwen. Julia tells them that it is an island where all their fantasies can be fulfilled, and she directs them to their rooms before their introduction to their host. From afar, an unruly man named Damon watches the whole procession. Getting into their rooms, Gwen is surprised at how her room is prepared. She asks Julia how it is possible for Roarke to tailor their rooms based on a 1-page questionnaire. Julia confesses that she is new, and how things work here is as much a mystery to her as anything else. Gwen undresses and goes to the bathroom, but she notices footprints soaked in blood. She then sees the ghost of a man who seems to have been horribly burned. Later in the evening, all of the guests get together at the reception. They get to know each other through an informal introduction. Melanie flirts with Patrick, and Gwen is seen reservedly observing them. They all then speculate on how this realization of their fantasies would work. Melanie and JD think that it should be virtual reality and holograms. Then enters Roarke, who officially welcomes them to the island and promises them that they will not be disappointed. He then stipulates the 2 rules of the island. First, there would be only 1 fantasy per guest. And second, the guests must see their fantasy to its natural conclusion. Part 2. The Fantasies. JD and Brax's fantasy begins first. Roarke brings them to their fantasy of an endless party. JD hangs out with a crowd of hot women while Brax is taken to a group of handsome men. JD and Brax are having the best moments of their lives. While partying, Brax also sees what looks like an apparition of a horribly burned man. JD and Brax are at a pool and talking about how their night went. Later, they go screwing around with what is in their mansion. They find a secret room filled with an array of guns and grenades. They take a few grenades and throw one into the sea. JD and Brax are still partying with a group of beautiful men and women. They hear gunshots, and one of the guys gets hit in the head. The group leaves the room and moves toward the secret room in JD's suite. Brax gets on the phone to inform Roarke of what is happening. The rest of the group gets into the secret room, however, before JD and Brax could get in, the door gets closed. The next morning, Gwen meets Roarke, who asks her questions specific to her background. She is shown to her fantasy a restaurant where she rejected a proposal from her ex-boyfriend in order to pursue her career goals. She is met by her ex-boyfriend, Alan. He is real and has been roped into the fantasy, which Gwen feels bad for. However, she enjoys reconnecting with Alan, and when he proposes once again, she chooses to accept. Melanie talks to Patrick about her personal fantasy, which is to torment her former school bully. Roarke then takes her to a basement where she finds Sloane tied up behind a 2-way mirror. Thinking it is just a hologram, Melanie proceeds to torture her by zapping her or dumping toilet water on her. She then uploads a video of Sloane having an affair with another man, which is posted on Facebook for her husband to see. The computer then calls her husband, and Melanie quickly realizes that Sloane is really there. She tries to stop her from getting hurt more. A man dressed as a surgeon enters. He resembles a doctor who used to terrify Melanie, whom she nicknamed Dr. Torture. He gets ready to use a buzzsaw on Sloane's arm until Melanie turns on the cattle prod and toilet water to electrocute Dr. Torture and free Sloane. Melanie pretends she was also kidnapped to hide that she was torturing Sloane. They leave the torture room and run to the wilderness. Dr. Torture reappears and holds Sloane by her neck. Before he could kill her, Damon impales Dr. Torture with his machete. Damon tells them that if they want to survive, they must follow him. Patrick is taken to his fantasy, which puts him back in a war setting in the 1980s. He is taken captive by a group of American soldiers. He is taken to their team leader, who resembles Patrick's father, who was killed in action. Right then, they get under enemy fire, and a bloody fight begins. Patrick freezes and is shocked. He gets hit and collapses. Patrick wakes up later that night in the forest among the American soldiers with his hands tied up. Lieutenant Sullivan confronts Patrick after finding a picture of himself with his son in Patrick's belongings. Patrick says that it is him with his father. Lieutenant Sullivan is still not convinced, but Patrick then gives him information that only he and his father would know. Sullivan slowly begins to realize that Patrick is actually his son. Patrick tells him that he died 27 years ago on a classified mission while saving his men. Gwen wakes up to find that she has already married Alan and that they have a 5-year-old daughter named Lila. Gwen tries to find Roarke and change her fantasy because this is not what she had in mind. She talks to Julia and tells her that her fantasy was to go back and save someone from a fire she caused. Part 3. The second condition of fantasies. Lieutenant Sullivan walks with Patrick and tells him that they are going back home. Patrick insists to the point of getting into a physical fight with his father that they must continue their mission. Patrick says that since they now know what will happen, they can prevent it or change its course. Back in the mansion, JD and Brax are interrogated by Kalashov's thugs. They are questioned about the whereabouts of money and drugs that are supposedly in the mansion. They attempt to trick the thugs by saying that the money is in the garage. Meanwhile, Damon, Melanie, and Sloane are walking through the forest to find a way out of the island. Damon leads them to a network of caves. The caves are mysterious and obscure. Sloane is seen to be followed by what appears to be her own ghost. Then Melanie sees the ghost of the burned man. Proceeding, they reach a fountain where each person can see their deepest desires in it. Damon tells the girls that he was a private investigator who showed up as a guest on the island. His fantasy was to see his dead daughter again. Damon states that Roarke is evil and uses the black water of the fountain to grant guests' wishes. Damon fills a canteen with the black water to expose Roarke. They then leave the fountain and head towards the hotel. On a hill, the three are attacked by Dr. Torture again. Damon gets injured, and having no other way to save the girls, Damon sacrifices himself by throwing himself and Dr. Torture over the edge of a cliff. Gwen meets Roarke to change her fantasy. She is persistent and states that her biggest fantasy was to change the moment she regrets most. Roarke agrees to grant her fantasy. Gwen enters her new fantasy with the burning building. She sees JD and Brax running away. She tries to make her way into the burning apartment to save the victim, Nick Taylor. She runs outside to get help, finding Patrick there as a cop who doesn't help, since he wants to wait for the firefighters. Gwen runs back inside but goes unconscious until she is found by Julia. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Brax tricks the thugs into getting into the armory and locks the door. He fires and kills one of the thugs with a shotgun. However, like Dr. Torture, none of these thugs can actually be killed. Patrick, Lieutenant Sullivan, and the soldiers arrive at the site of their mission, which happens to be the mansion. Brax gets out of the armory with a hand grenade and threatens to blow everyone up. He disarms the two remaining thugs and forces them to lead him to JD. Patrick sees them and thinks that it might be the hostage situation that they were supposed to handle. However, he finds Brax there. The thugs use this opportunity to attack Patrick and Brax. The soldiers killed the thug who had held JD hostage. Sullivan and his soldiers release JD and the models who were trapped in there. They are ordered to move out of the mansion immediately. Sullivan and his party meet Patrick and Brax, who are still fighting the thugs. Patrick kills both thugs, and Brax safely pins back the grenade. It slowly gets revealed that the fantasies of the 5 guests are merging. While Brax and JD get together, JD is shot and killed by a thug. The thugs come from all directions and cannot be killed at all. A fierce fight ensues between the American soldiers and the thugs. Lieutenant Sullivan stays to hold the thugs and orders everyone to quickly leave the mansion. Patrick sees his father heroically fighting the thugs and gets killed. Melanie and Sloane return to the torture room to reach a phone. Sloane calls her husband and apologizes to him for her deception. They then contact Damon's associates for help escaping the island. Part 4, the final act. As everything is starting to get worse, the guests gather to confront Roarke and his henchmen over the fantasy, as they are all in the fantasy of someone who wants them dead, and Gwen concludes they are all connected to Nick. She caused the fire that killed him by accidentally leaving the kettle on in her apartment, and Patrick was at the scene but didn't go in to help. JD was Nick's roommate and was going to check on him, but Brax made him leave. Melanie was supposed to go on a date with Nick that night, but got sick and backed out, meaning Nick wouldn't have died if she was with him. They then run to catch the plane, but it is shot down by the thugs. The guests run to hide and believe that Julia is Nick's mother, who wants revenge on them. They resolve to destroy Roarke's fountain to stop the fantasy altogether. The group enters the cave to find the fountain, where they are attacked by manifestations of their personal demons. Sloane sees her bullying self, while Patrick is attacked by dead people he couldn't save, and Gwen sees that Lila has killed Alan. Nick's ghost also appears before her, but he doesn't know who Julia is when Gwen mentions her. After they fight everyone off, Melanie appears before Patrick and starts stabbing him. The others reach the fountain to destroy it with a grenade, but Roarke stops them because Julia was his wife and he doesn't want to stop seeing her after she passes away. It is then revealed that they are all in Melanie's fantasy. She wanted to go out with Nick that night, but she stood him up due to her self-doubt from Sloane's bullying. Roarke sees that Julia is close to succumbing to her illness again, and she convinces him that it is time to let her go once and for all. He does so and goes to help the others. He tells Sloane that she still has to fulfill a fantasy. She drinks from the canteen and wishes for Melanie and Nick to end up together. Nick's zombie then emerges from the fountain and pulls Melanie inside, causing the zombies to disappear. She jumps out quickly to throw back the grenade, but Patrick throws himself onto it to save everyone. Gwen, Sloane, and Brax wake up the next day as they are preparing to leave. Roarke tells Brax that he technically lived out JD's fantasy, so he still has one he can use. His fantasy is for JD to return home alive, which would mean he would have to stay on the island. Brax agrees, and JD goes home on the plane with Gwen and Sloane. Brax then reveals JD's nickname for him, Tattoo. He stays and becomes Roarke's new assistant. Wow. Part 5. The Verdict. The movie begins on a promising note. The whole idea of having a trip to a fantasy island where the wildest of one's desires come true is quite fascinating. However, the script gets annoying after a while. This is particularly true about the horror aspects of the movie, which have not been placed in an effective manner. Furthermore, the characters are not well developed, and the additional elements that are added now and then to the story make no sense. As we pass halftime and proceed towards its conclusion, the movie makes less and less sense. This was our recap and verdict. Tell us what you liked or disliked about this movie. Let us know in the comment section what movie we should recap next. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified when we upload new videos and enjoy watching.